there, fellow Patriots. Welcome back to Patriots of the American Republic. We've got another episode, so let's go ahead and jump into it. So, just when it seems like Democrats can't get any lower, they managed to surprise me. Over the last two videos, we covered how they ran cover for an alleged MS-13 gang member, human trafficking wife beater. They have judges obstructing justice by protecting not illegal aliens, but criminal illegal aliens. That's the cherry on top. We've shown how they defended criminality and lawlessness over victims, the rule of law, and common sense. Today is going to be no different as we continue to show example after example of how ridiculous the left is with their views and way of thinking. Now, as always, I like to show contrast as to where Democrats used to be and where they are today to set the tone. So let's do that right now.
Remember this.
If you're a criminal, you'll be deported. If you plan to enter the U.S. illegally, your chances of getting caught and sent back just went up. The actions I'm taking are not only lawful, they're the kinds of actions taken by every single Republican president and every single Democratic president for the past half century.
You wouldn't believe that looking at the media today, though. They act like Trump is the worst, most evil person ever for deporting illegal alien criminals. Yet Obama, Bill Clinton, and other Democrats were all on board with this for years up until Trump, and they're on tape saying so.
Committed a crime, deport them. No questions asked, they're gone.
Public service they use impose burdens on our taxpayers. That's why our administration has moved aggressively to secure our borders more by hiring a record number of new border guards, by deporting twice as many criminal aliens as ever before, by cracking down on illegal hiring, by barring welfare benefits to illegal aliens.
We use phrases like undocumented workers. We convey a message to the American people that their government is not serious about combating illegal immigration.
Oh, really?
We simply cannot allow people to pour into the United States undetected, undocumented, unchecked.
We will try to do more to speed the deportation of illegal aliens who are arrested for crimes, to better identify illegal aliens in the workplace.
This is your reminder that Obama deported 5.3 million people and Bill Clinton deported 12.3 million. They were fine with it then. Why the sudden change of heart?
So as you can see on this graph, this young lady is absolutely spot on with her numbers, and yet we never heard anything remotely close for any of those folks to what we're hearing today with Donald Trump. Actually, it's been since he came on the campaign trail, right? I mean, again, I remember going back, in my teenage years and seeing some of those, well, specifically when it came to Bill Clinton. We didn't hear chants of white supremacy back then or Nazism or dictatorship, none of that stuff, or rule of law or due process. We didn't hear any of that. So again, I have to pose the question to my friends on the left, what changed? The Republican Party obviously didn't change. So I need somebody to explain to me like I'm a kindergartner what the heck changed in the Democratic Party. So let's fast forward to the hill that the Democrats are entrenched to die on. They've done the unthinkable by defending an illegal alien from El Salvador who was allegedly trafficking people, has domestic violence reports against him for physically assaulting his wife. Now, in prior videos, I just gave you a video summary of Pam Bondi, but we didn't actually go into the video evidence. So I think it's important that, we do that now. So let's cover his status. I think at this juncture, it's undeniable this guy is here illegally. As we know, there have been two separate immigration judges who ordered Mr. Garcia to be deported. So I'll get into the details of that deportation a little bit later on, but for now, this part is uncontested. Let's tackle the human trafficking. Mr. Garcia is pulled over for speeding by Tennessee police state trooper, if I'm not mistaken, a few years back.
Hello, sir.
How are you?
Good, and you?
All right.
Anything good?
You got a bunch of people here, don't you?
One for sin. Yes. Go back to work.
Gotcha. Where are you working at?
Where?
Where?
San Luis, Missouri.
Missouri?
Yes, sir.
Gotcha. Okay.
I'm from to Maryland. The problem with my license right now is expired, right?
It's suspended?
Suspended.
What do y'all do?
Huh?
What kind of work is it?
It's construction, like remoderation, painting, drywall, everything like that.
Does anybody else have a driver's license?
Driver license?
Yeah.
No,
Nobody?
only me.
You know what you got here, right? He's hauling these people for money. You got an ass hauler is what he's doing. But there's 8 people in there.
Yeah.
They don't have any luggage in there, right? And if you get them out, they're going to have toothpaste and they're going to have toothbrushes in their pockets, I guarantee you.
In that exchange, he tells the officer he doesn't have his car papers, right? Like his insurance, his registration, because it's his boss's car. And he doesn't have his license because it's suspended. Now, not sure about you, but I know I can't drive with a suspended license. And if I did get caught, I think I'd be getting arrested, and the car that I was driving would get impounded. That's just me, so I don't understand. Then additionally, at the end of the video, the other police officer seems to deduce the obvious human trafficking scenario before them. So I think we've tackled the human trafficking aspect of this scenario. Next, let's tackle the alleged violence towards his wife. But before we do, let's have a refresher of what she sounded like just a few days, maybe about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, when she was interviewed by Michael Strahan.
You did take out a temporary order of protection against your husband in 2021. Were you in fear of your husband?
My husband is alive. That's all I can say.
Okay, and you know I'm not going to push on that.
Now, let's listen to what she sounded like before the crowdfunding campaign.
I kept trying to get to the door basement to try to open the door, and then like he pushed me. So I saw a neighbor walking his dog, and I opened the door and I was like, help. And then when he heard me, like he grabbed me from my hair and then he slapped me. Even on Wednesday, he hit me like around like 3 in the morning. He would just wake up and like hit me. Before I went to my daughter's birthday party, he slapped me 3 times. And then last week I did call the police. My sister called the police because he hit me in front of my sister.
So funny how Democrats jumped on the story before doing their research and getting the full scope of the story. And it's pretty obvious they didn't do their research, because here we have Congressional Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries telling Democrats to stop going to El Salvador.
Hakeem Jeffries wants Democrats to put an end to El Salvador trips. Cory Booker and the Hispanic caucus were planning on going, but Democratic leadership seems to want El Salvador trips to stop for a while. And by the way, this comes only a couple days after Hakeem Jeffries said this.
I think, as you've seen, and there's been some great leadership from Senator Chris Van Hollen, who apparently indicated earlier today that either his constituent is returned or he plans to go to El Salvador himself. And that's exactly the type of action, as members of Congress, we can do to highlight the injustice, dramatize and amplify it, and force the administration to comply, which in this instance, I believe we will make sure happens.
So did you catch that from Mr. Jeffries? He thought that this was Senator Van Hollen's constituent. This is exactly what my gut feeling was telling me. They thought this was a U.S. citizen that Trump accidentally deported, simply because he was mistakenly deported to El Salvador, but not that he was mistakenly deported. So in essence, according to the Supreme Court ruling, he shouldn't have been deported to El Salvador, but he should have been deported to another country, right? The deportation is valid. It's just where is the question mark, and we'll get into the details of that a little bit later on down the line. So it's pretty obvious how the Democrats went from Maryland man to due process, and it's been pretty much due process since then. We showed how Garcia received due process because, again, he had an order of deportation. So the issue, again, isn't really the deportation, but where he was deported to. As we showed, Stephen Miller confirms he had a request to not be deported to El Salvador, Again, which is why SCOTUS ruled for the Trump administration to facilitate his return. So let's see the interaction from a few weeks back when President Bukele visited the White House and reporters asked them about this particular situation.
The man who your administration says was mistakenly deported. The man who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador?
He was illegally in our country. He had been illegally in our country. And in 2019, two courts, an immigration court and an appellate immigration court, ruled that he was a member of MS-13 and he was illegally in our country. The Supreme Court ruled, President, if they wanted to return him, we would facilitate it, meaning provide a plane.
There's an illegal alien from El Salvador. With respect to you, he's a citizen of El Salvador. It's very arrogant even for American media to suggest that we would even tell El Salvador how to handle their own citizens. As two immigration courts found that he was a member of MS-13. When President Trump declared MS-13 to be a foreign terrorist organization, under federal law, he was no longer eligible for any form of immigration relief in the United States. So he had a deportation order, which meant that under our law, he's not even allowed to be present in the United States and had to be returned because of the foreign terrorist designation.
Can President Bukele weigh in on this? Do you plan to return him?
Suppose you're not suggesting that I smuggle a terrorist into the United States, right? How can I return him to the United States? Like I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not going to do it. The question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States. I mean, we're not very fond of releasing terrorists into our country. We just turned the murder capital of the world into the safest country of the Western Hemisphere, and you want us to go back into the releasing criminals so we can go back to being the murder capital of the world? And that's not going to happen.
Well, they'd love to have a criminal, released into our country.
I mean, there's a fascination.
They would love it. These are sick people.
Well, Mr. President, you said that if the Supreme Court said someone needed to be returned, that you would abide by that. You said that on Air Force One just a few days ago, and they said that it must be facilitated.
Why don't you just say, isn't it wonderful that we're keeping criminals out of our country? Why can't you just say that? Why do you go over and over? And that's why nobody watches you anymore. You have no credibility.
So a couple of things I want to take away from that little clip. Number one, Pam Bondi explains the details regarding the due process this individual already got. He was seen by an immigration judge or an immigration court, and then he also had an appellate court. So you got an immigration appellate court, right? So he received his due process, and the due process showed that he needed to go, right? As Stephen Miller confirms the details of the deportation ruling. Additionally, Pam Bondi acknowledges that they would facilitate the return should President Bukele release the gang member. And Stephen Miller reminds the reporter that no one has the authority to tell President Bukele what to do regarding their own citizen. So the Supreme Court justice has no jurisdiction in El Salvador or what the El Salvadorian president does, right? President Bukele confirms, obviously in a sarcastic manner, that he will not be releasing a violent terrorist, which is what President Trump deemed these violent gang members as. He deemed them as terrorists. So that request that Garcia has is null and void because we don't grant those requests to terrorist groups, right? Now, every once in a while, CNN ends up telling some type of a truth, as this CNN lawyer confirms that Trump is within the lines of the Supreme Court ruling.
And President Trump and President Bukele made it clear that Abrego Garcia will not be returned to the United States, despite this U.S. Supreme Court ruling saying that Trump had to facilitate his return. So are they just ignoring a U.S. Supreme Court ruling, or is the fact that the ruling was so mushy, in your words, giving him an opening?
It's a technical term I learned in law school, Jake. Mushy, look, they're working within the ambiguity that the Supreme Court justices gave them. They did not order the administration to return him to the United States. They said that they need to facilitate this return. They could have said, we order him returned, but they didn't do that.
Despite all these details, the left continues to champion for this guy, but the narrative has changed. Now it's a constitutional situation, all while threatening El Salvador with sanctions and more.
I like that idea. It's a complement to something that we need to be doing right now, which is engaging in far more work of transnational democratic solidarity with the democratic governments and the democratic movements and peoples and parties of the world to try to prevent the spread of the lawlessness and the fascist chaos that's been unleashed against us. But implicit in it should be the idea that if and when we come back to power, and we will, we are not going to look kindly upon people who facilitated authoritarianism in our country, because that's an assault on our Constitution and on our people.
A not so subtle threat. When we come back to power, quote, we are not going to look kindly. So let me get this straight. If a foreign country supports Trump's policies or engages positively with this administration, Raskin and his little DNC gang are going to retaliate against them when they return to power? That's not diplomacy, that's mafia talk.
We're doing this both to require the Trump administration to answer for its unconstitutional violations of due process and send a message to President Bukele that no, it is not cool to collude with Trump to deprive people living in America the right to due process. In addition to this resolution, I've called upon all Americans who care about their due process rights to vote with their feet. Don't go to El Salvador as tourists, so long as the government of El Salvador is violating the constitutional rights of people who reside in America. There are lots of other nice countries in the region. I've also called upon states to divest pension fund holdings from companies that do business in El Salvador. And finally, Senator Kaine and I, along with Senator Schumer and others, are planning to also introduce sanctions legislation targeting President Bukele and all those who are part of his government conspiring with Donald Trump to deprive residents of the United States of their constitutional right.
So aside from the mob-like actions, Democrats are trying to bully a foreign government who is aiding us to take in illegal aliens off of our streets and keep us safe, which is honestly grotesque. But I want you, the audience, to focus on the last piece of what the senator says. Conspiring to deprive residents of the United States their constitutional rights. So, what is the benefit of being a U.S. citizen if we're on the same grounds as illegal aliens? Now, I'm not talking about human rights. Everyone should be treated with dignity, but why does someone who broke the law to come here get preferential treatment over someone who was born here or legally went through the correct process to be here? And yes, it is preferential treatment because I've stated this before. I can't break federal law and get away with it. Therefore, no one else should be able to either. That is being treated equal. Playing favoritism and picking and choosing who does and who doesn't isn't equal at all. But now that some of the Democrats are backtracking, the media is going to look for more stories in order to continue to prevent Trump from his deportation plans. I've seen stories such as the following screenshot that you guys are viewing right now. 2-year-old citizen deported without meaningful process. Naturally, the media is doing this on purpose to crater Trump's approval rating, demonizing him to lower his support, to decrease his support specifically amongst the Hispanic community, which, and quite honestly, helped him win, right? It was an important part of his winning campaign, which will obviously impact the midterms for next year. These guys are always one step ahead of the Republicans, unfortunately. But as always, the details in every case matter. The mother of this 2-year-old was here illegally, and instead of leaving the child with her father, she wanted to take the child with her. So the government granted her request because they're not going to separate the families the left cried so much about during the first administration.
That's a misleading headline. Okay, 3 U.S. citizens, ages 4, 7, and 2, were not deported. Their mothers, who are legally in this country, were deported. The children went with their mothers. If those children are U.S. citizens, they can come back into the United States if there's their father or someone here who wants to assume them. But ultimately, who was deported was their mothers who were here illegally. The children just went with their mothers. But it wasn't like, you guys make it sound like ICE agents kicked down the door and grabbed the 2-year-old and threw him on an airplane. That's misleading. Yeah. That's just not true.
Then we have this gem of a story where the father was sent to El Salvador for alleged gang affiliation, and the mother was sent back to Venezuela, as both came into the country illegally, but the child that they came with was born in Peru and was not deported with their mother because of accusations of prostitution towards the mother, and the U.S. did not feel it was in the child's best interest to put the child in a potentially terrible and dangerous environment. Now, the Hispanic journalists having a field day with the story. The mother has aligned herself to the dictator Nicolas Maduro, who has vowed to fight the imperialistic Yankees to bring back her daughter. We already know Maduro is on the left, as we showed in a prior video that we did last year. And it's fascinating how the media will align themselves with dictators and communist governments like Venezuela and China in order to go against Trump. I mean, this is like straight up TDS to the 10th power. So I'm going to show you a summary of this scenario that I just finished explaining to you, real brief, just so that you can get the gist of it, right?
The country of Venezuela is calling out the Trump administration for allegedly abducting a 2-year-old girl after they deported her parents without her. First, let's get to some context. Yorli Bernal Inciarte and her partner, Maker Escalona, enter the U.S. with their daughter, who goes by Antonella, in May of 2024 under the Biden administration. But even under Biden, they weren't here together. Inciarte told ABC News when Inciarte, Escalona, and their child entered the U.S. last year and surrendered to authorities, the three were separated. Inciarte and Escalona were placed in separate detention centers in Texas, and their daughter was placed in government custody. She told ABC News she was able to speak with her daughter on video calls and with Escalona over the phone. So according to their attorneys, the two parents were placed in asylum proceedings, but eventually they asked for a deportation order so they could be reunited with their child. And their requests were granted, but not in the way that they had hoped. In late April, Ms. Bernal called her mother, Rita Inciarte, and told her that she was going to be deported back to Venezuela. On the video call, Ms. Bernal showed her mother a document from immigration authorities bearing Antonella's name, which she claimed indicated the child would be leaving the United States with her. Unfortunately, when she left on April 25th, her daughter was not there, and the Trump administration would not say when or if the little girl would ever be reunited with her family. And to make matters worse, Escalona wasn't just deported, he was actually sent to CICOT in El Salvador a month prior. The Trump administration had labeled the couple members of Tren de Aragua. And of course, it's just a label. It's not a conviction, because you can't convict anyone without due process, of course. In a statement released by the DHS this weekend, the child's father, Maker Espinoza Escalona, is a lieutenant of Tren de Aragua who oversees homicides, drug sales, kidnappings, extortion, sex trafficking, and operates a torture house. The child's mother, Yorli Escalante Bernal Inciarte, oversees recruitment of young women for drug smuggling and prostitution. Of course, the Trump administration provided zero evidence to justify any of the things that they said. Nonetheless, the Trump administration claims the parents are criminals and says they're keeping the child in the United States to protect her. President Trump and Secretary Noem take their responsibility to protect children seriously. We will not allow this child to be abused and continue to be exposed to criminal activity that endangers her safety. Again, no evidence that any of that was happening, to which Inciarte stated, if it's true, then release the evidence. Release the proof that we are Tren de Aragua. They took a child away from their mother and they're telling lies about us. And you know who else isn't happy about any of this? Venezuelan authorities, including top government officials and their foreign ministry, who are now accusing the U.S. of kidnapping and abduction. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro lashed out at the Trump administration, stating, "This is a crime whichever way you see it, taking a 2-year-old girl away from a migrant mother just because she is a migrant and a Venezuelan," and accusing her without evidence of being a member of a criminal gang and using it as an excuse to steal her child is a crime under any international law.
So here are a few takeaways from this particular video. So these people left Venezuela and migrated to Peru. I'm unclear if it was legally or illegally. I'm going to guess that it was illegally. But then during the Biden administration, they decided to illegally migrate from Peru to the U.S. Now, according to the mother's own testimony in a separate video, they were all separated during the Biden administration when they came into the United States. Funny how we didn't hear anything about family separations under the Biden administration. The child was born in Peru, thus making her a Peruvian citizen and not a Venezuelan citizen, which complicates things a little bit more. Here's the interesting part. Here are the questions. Why would the U.S. take on the burden of caring for a child or taking responsibility of the child if not for something serious, right? I mean, there's got to be something really bad going on for the U.S. to say, you know what, we're going to stay with this girl. We're not going to deport her with her parents, right? So is the administration really going to make up accusations just to stay with the child? Like, wouldn't it be easier to just deport them all? I think so. So there's definitely something going on here, and they're just not false accusations as the media is trying to make it seem. The final thing is, why does the U.S. have to provide any evidence at all other than the fact that they're here illegally? Like, it would take decades to provide evidence for every single illegal alien, criminal or not, that gets deported. I'm sorry, but if you came in illegally, you shouldn't be here. Remember how they did this with, Kilmar Abrego Garcia. They asked for proof of his alleged crimes. The administration did so. They released all this evidence, and then it's become a circus since then. I mean, seriously, we only have 4 years to clear as much of this mess as we can, and the Democrats are trying to impede this on purpose, in my opinion. Now, here's the thing. I want to play the small clip of dictator Maduro being interviewed regarding this situation. I'm going to translate this, but there are a few things I want to take away that I want you guys to hone in on.
Esto es un crimen por donde se vea. Arrebatarle una niña de 2 años a una madre migrante solo porque es migrante y es venezolana y acusarla sin pruebas de que es miembro de una banda criminal y ponerlo como excusa para robarle a su niña es un crimen ante cualquier ley internacional. Si en este mundo hubiera justicia, la gente que lo hizo debería estar presa. Sin duda. Si en este mundo hubiera justicia, pero ni la Corte Penal ni la Corte Internacional de Justicia hacen nada por la justicia. Se ocupan de y si en Estados Unidos hubiera justicia, espero que la haya, algún juez rescataría a esta niña, metería preso a quien se la arrebató de los brazos de su madre en el avión que la iba a regresar a Venezuela y se la regresaría de inmediato. Quienes están dando estas órdenes se parecen a los perseguidores nazis.
Más temprano que tarde vamos a rescatar sana y salva a nuestra niña Michaelis Espinosa.
Que es falso todo lo que están diciendo. Están tapando el secuestro de mi hija con esas acusaciones para pensar que yo soy una mala madre, pero eso es mentira. Aquí estoy con mi pueblo luchando para traerme a mi hija.
So, I find it absolutely disgusting for this dictator who has been accused of threatening, killing political opponents, jailing and torturing young children, a man who unleashed his military and to run over and shoot college protesters would talk about human rights violations. This is utterly disgusting, and politics is just the dirtiest thing possible. The second point is that, yet again, the leftist tactic of calling the right Nazis. That's exactly what he did. He called Trump a Nazi. Who calls the right Nazis? It's the left. That's their tactic. We saw him call Jorge Ramos last year a right-wing propagandist, which would indicate that he's on the left. And here he is doing a very similar leftist tactic by calling Trump and the right party Nazis, right? So I hope you can see the pattern here. Finally, I want to point out is how this girl has now aligned herself with Maduro and states that she's there for her country and town. So my question is, why did she leave the town that she apparently loves so much to begin with, right? Additionally, they came in seeking asylum. So it can't be political because she's now aligned with the Maduro regime. So obviously it wasn't political. It's obvious not domestic because they migrated as a family. So then there's no allegations of domestic abuse there, domestic abuse. The remaining one would be gang violence, which would be an indicator that there could be potentially some type of gang affiliation by this guy. So now, if none of those are true, then the asylum that they claimed was false. I don't know which poison the left wants to pick in this particular case, but something is not lining up here with a good portion of these cases, right? When you start to dig into them, right? You start to realize that there's more than what the left reports on, right? Now, two things that Trump ran on is the economy and immigration. Over 80% of Republicans voted for mass deportation It's closer to the 90% range. And about over 60%, according to CNN Democrats that we did a video on just not too long ago, approved of mass deportation of every illegal immigrant. So it's not just the right that wants this, right? When asked specifically about Kilmar Garcia, though, watch how some New Yorkers feel about the dubious past of Garcia as they give their opinions regarding this matter.
So there's this illegal immigrant. He was living in Maryland, designated MS-13 terrorist, and Donald Trump deported him. How does that make you feel?
I feel safer.
He gotta go. He gotta go.
Need to go. I mean, that's it.
But he was a father.
But he's still a terrorist.
Okay. I mean, but there's children living without fathers now.
He should have picked the tree, so he picked to be a terrorist instead of worrying about his children.
The Democrats, they want him back. They say he was wrongfully deported. He has a wife and a kid who's a citizen. They're calling this a national emergency. Is this a national emergency?
I wouldn't call it a national emergency. We got more things going on.
We have more things, more fish to fry.
I just found out about it, so I don't think so. What kind of national emergency? For what? What is the emergency for?
Ain't no national emergency, no.
He was accused of hitting his wife twice and was a suspected human smuggler. Was he wrongfully deported?
No. He need to go.
If he's a smuggler, yeah, he need to be deported.
It's better to be safe than sorry.
So thankfully, the Trump administration, along with governors, Attorney General Pam Bondi, FBI, Homeland Security, DOJ, and many others are cracking down on the criminal element that has been allowed to pour into our country over the past 4 years.
We've got a Venezuelan migrant who was arrested 16 times in 2 years, and every single time, like I always say, the left-wing revolving door of the justice system, they let him back onto the streets to reoffend constantly. Assaults, drug charges, theft, booked 1 week, back on the streets the next. Now Donald Trump comes in, and boom, they take decisive action, grab the guy, and he is now in ICE custody. Hopefully I'm painting a very clear contrast here. Donald Trump isn't waiting for another tragedy, he is acting, and it doesn't end there. Speaking of scumbags being picked up off the streets, we've got ICE now arresting an illegal migrant who's been wanted for the last 13 years after allegedly taking a 13-year-old girl's life in Texas. While the previous administration seemingly wasn't so interested in tracking this guy down, now a couple months into the Trump administration, and boom, they got the guy off the street.
We spoke to this father who is a veteran and single dad. He has spent more than a decade fighting for justice for his 13-year-old daughter who was killed by an illegal migrant back in 2014. So Chris Odette, he sat exclusively with Fox. He says he dropped off his 13-year-old daughter, Krisha, at a sleepover. That was the last time he would see her. Rockwell police say Krisha was crossing the street, not a crosswalk, when she was struck and killed. The driver, Ramiro Guevara, an illegal migrant from Mexico. According to ICE, Border Patrol encountered him twice before Krisha's death. He was also wanted at the time for driving without a license and speeding. Just 15 months earlier, Odette lost his wife to breast cancer. He says he made a promise to his wife to always protect their daughter.
America is safer tonight thanks to Donald Trump. During the Biden administration, they received 170 911 calls to that club alone. That club we were just watching, 170 calls. Wouldn't you think that would have been a red flag?
Wouldn't.
Nothing happened. Guns, shootings, ag batteries, nothing happened. So under Donald Trump, DEA, FBI, U.S. Marshals, ATF, ICE, everyone went in together. DEA led this investigation, went in, got 115 illegal immigrants, aliens in our country, arrested them, 2 with warrants, 12 guns seized. So what would happen in this club is you would go in, security would give you a menu of drugs. You could go in a bathroom stall, get that, there was prostitution, all these things going on. And we just now identified a member of Sinaloa cartel was also in there.
Officials at this press conference just this morning, Nicole, they called this the largest joint immigration effort in Florida history. ICE dubbing it a first-of-its-kind partnership, they said, as you mentioned, between federal, state, and local officials. ICE actually just releasing this video about an hour ago of some of the arrests they made. Florida officers assisting federal immigration agents in arresting arresting more than 1,100 people in a roughly week-long period. DHS told us that at least one of the people taken into custody is a documented member of MS-13. Another is a Russian national with an Interpol red notice. The White House and Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem called this operation in Florida a warning, telling undocumented immigrants, "We're coming for you." In this morning's press conference, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis said that massive roundups like this operation that happened just last week are just the beginning.
Now, you'd think these examples are good news for regular folks like us, right? Like you and me. But no, the left seems to really be in love with criminal aliens. Check this one out.
The White House has put up about 100 posters of what they say are unauthorized immigrants who have been arrested for violent crimes. You can see them there. They put them up on the driveway of the White House. If you look here, that's the West Wing just at the forefront, the executive mansion itself to the left. But what's particularly noteworthy about this location is it is right directly behind the positions where TV correspondents do their hits from the White House lawn. So therefore, no matter what network you're on, that includes MSNBC, if you're doing a hit from the White House right now, those pictures will be behind you. The White House doing a briefing in about a half hour about what they're doing here. Maria, your response to this image.
So I have to say, one of the biggest challenges that we have with the deportations that we know of so far, for example, with Kilmer Abrego Garcia, we don't know if they've had due process. We don't know if, in fact, these individuals do have a rap sheet. So I would encourage those individuals that have that as a backshot to blur those people out. The job of journalism is to ensure that we are presenting the facts, that we are cross-referencing. We know that PolyFact actually checked the Trump administration because of an earlier picture that they released on Kilmer, recognizing that it was altered, that it was false, that they had placed gang signs, tattoos on him that weren't real. And so I would really, the press right now, we are absolutely under attack. Our job is always to have our true north, to make sure that we're presenting balanced news, and making sure that we are not putting folks that are potentially in danger, and having that representation of those pictures in the background. We can't allow that to basically for us to carry the water of potentially innocent people. So I would encourage, I recognize live shots are tough, but I would encourage folks to actually make sure that those shots are blurred to the best of your abilities. We know better.
Well said. Well said. And again, the focus here, doing the work, doing it well. As journalists, it's never been more important.
So now they're unauthorized, right? It's not undocumented. Obviously, we have some documents because we have some type of criminal record going on that the Trump administration is posting there. So now it's unauthorized. I love the word gymnastics that they do. But do you know what's most shocking about this clip, though? Is how this Maria reporter is suggesting to blur out the faces of these alleged criminals and, in essence, shielding them. She claims to want to ensure that they are presenting the facts, cross-referencing, present balanced news. Let's refresh ourselves on how MSNBC covered Biden's cognitive decline and how they covered the Hunter Biden laptop story and many, many examples that we've gone over time and time again on this channel, right? So spare me the lies, spare me the gaslighting, which these people continue to do, and it's absolutely stupid. So here's my question. Why are these reporters not investigating these details themselves? I mean, what happened to investigative journalists? Now, Stephen Miller gives us a good example of how these journalists seem to be operating in today's day and age.
Is the president going to ask for him to be returned to the United States or not? Like, yes or no?
Let me ask you, what do you think would happen to him if he came back to this country? As your understanding of immigration laws, what do you think would happen?
But I'm just asking at this point about whether or not
you're asking a lot of questions.
The president,
you're all asking a lot of questions about this, and you also care about it a lot. So let's see if any of you who've researched anything about this issue at all. Can anyone here tell me what would happen to the illegal alien from El Salvador if he came back to the United States? Does anyone here know? Anyone want to guess? Any of you?
He could be with his family.
Do you know the difference between a deportation order and a withholding order? Do you know the difference? Any of you? Please. Do you?
Well, we're not in the government.
But you couldn't even spend 72 hours over the weekend learning the distinction, even though you've been writing and talking about it this whole time. What I'm getting from this conversation, which is educational for me, is that not one person in the media knows the difference between a deportation order and a withholding order. Is that a fair statement? You're learning about this all for the first time right now? I guess so. Okay. So the deportation order means the judge has said he must be deported from the country. He has no right to remain here any longer. He must be removed from the country. So his only options are to be deported to his home country or another country. That's it. There's no other option. He doesn't get to stay here. He doesn't get to live here. He has no future here. He has no right to be here. He's an illegal alien. So when you keep saying return, because you've been spun up by the open borders advocates, you all seem to be operating under the illusion that he would be able to come to the United States and just continue to live here illegally. That's not an option available to him. His only choices in life are to live in El Salvador or to live in another country. That's it. There's no other option, legally or otherwise, because he came to our country illegally. Do you understand that? He would be arrested. He'd be put in confinement. He would be deported the second time to El Salvador again, because there's no withholding order for an alien who's a member of a foreign terrorist organization, number one. Number two is the gang that he's a member of doesn't exist in El Salvador anymore. So what you're asking for is to be deported twice. But additionally, if we chose to just pretend that the withholding order was real, he would be deported to a different country. So, for example, he could be deported to Egypt. So I'm just trying to understand, is it your view, in other words, you define a country that would be willing to take a MS-13 member from El Salvador. So I'm trying to understand from you all is, so if he came back and under our laws, he was then deported to Egypt or to Somalia, would you then be saying, great, I'm so glad that you deported him to another country?
It seems like these people just want Trump to provide the information, and that's pretty much it. I'm dead certain that these people can do the investigation themselves, but they don't want to because it'll absolutely give Trump the victory. No, they'd rather keep putting us or leaving us in danger while they play political ping pong because they hate President Trump. It's absolutely insane. In this next video, talking about insane, CNN interviews a cartel member in Mexico, and in my eyes, she tries to humanize this individual and asks him about his feelings regarding Trump designating him a terrorist. Watch for yourselves, and I mean, you guys deduce it yourselves, but this is how this is coming across to me.
This man is talking to us on the condition we hide his identity and location. Can I pull up a chair? He says he produces fentanyl for the Sinaloa cartel. How safe or dangerous is this area to be in?
En estos momentos todas las áreas son peligrosas.
The Mexican military making a big effort to crack down on the drug production here. How are you responding to that, and how does that impact your work?
Están haciendo un buen trabajo, pero pues como ellos vienen más, pues uno tiene que buscar la forma de seguir trabajando, claro, en baja escala, ¿entiendes? Pero no igual como antes, pero se sigue haciendo.
I mean, according to the Trump administration, you are a terrorist. I mean, the cartels have been labeled a foreign terrorist organization. What do you make of that?
Está fea la situación, ¿verdad? Está fea la situación, pero pues todos tenemos que comer.
What's your message to Donald Trump, if he's watching this?
Mis respetos, él tiene que según él, buscar lo mejor para los suyos. Pero el detalle que ya están los consumidores, ¿no? Si no hubiera consumidores, pues uno le paraba.
There is a lot of violence playing out on these streets here at the moment every day, right? I mean, people are dying on a daily basis. Children are afraid to go to school. Do you have any sense of remorse over your role and your involvement in this group?
Claro que sí. Claro que sí. Claro que sí. Pues está triste la cosa, pero pues está triste la cosa, pero está temblando mucho esta madre.
His phone is pinging. Someone is nearby. He tells us we need to leave for our own safety.
So notice the blame shift of the consumer in the U.S., which is part of the problem. But he says if it weren't for that, they wouldn't be doing it. Now, I do agree and understand the consumer aspect of the problem, but if you're willing to do something like this, And if there was no consumption of this particular fentanyl product, honestly, you just find something else illegal to do. That's just, you know, if you're a criminal, you're a criminal. You got a criminal mind. That's how it goes. But score another point for CNN for trying to humanize enemies of the U.S. and vilify our president. It really shows what side they're on. Now, here are my final thoughts. It's very clear to me the left hates America and hates the everyday American. They've absolutely lost touch with the vast majority of America, and thus, it's in my view, they need to import people who are going to be loyal to them and their party. The leftist media will continue to lie, manipulate, and deceive details in order to drive their fake propaganda narrative. I'm not sure how this is going to continue as more and more activist judges continue to impede the process of getting rid of people who entered the country illegally. But this will certainly gum up or even deter people from self-deportation if they're just able to wait it out. I mean, like I said before, we only have 4 years to clean up as much of this mess as we can. And I fear that those 4 years will be met with continuous pushback, which will prevent Trump from doing what he was elected to do. And it will continue to embolden people to come here illegally or fight it or stay here and just wait things out, which, again, is not fair to legal immigrants. And it's definitely not fair to people who don't break the law. Right, overall. But guys, that's what I have for you in this video. I hope it was enlightening. I hope that I was able to answer or dispel some of the confusion going on with this case, right? Because that's what the media loves to do. They love to throw up smoke screen, right? And they don't like to get into the root causes or the specific details of these matters. They'll only give you what the shock and awe aspect of things to get your emotions going. That's how they do it. And they're doing it to the Hispanic community. Like I told you guys before, for English-speaking Americans, we have at least some way to fight back. But for the Spanish-speaking, the Latin community, they only have 2 stations, Telemundo and Univision, and they're all both leftists. So the Hispanic community, it has no alternative information. They're absent from any type of alternative news. They're constantly being hammered by leftist propaganda, who for years they speak against Nicolas Maduro, but somehow now they're aligning with him. Oh yes, a human rights violation. Oh, President Maduro speaks out against Trump. They're absolutely disgusting. So guys, thank you so much for watching. Take care till next time. God bless Trump, God bless the U.S., and God bless each and every one of you guys. Take care. Bye-bye.